Attorney Andrew Diaz, partner at Gaylord, Merlin, Ludovici, and Diaz, joins us today to discuss eminent domain and walks us through the process of protecting your rights. We hope you enjoy.
In Our Expert Opinion podcast is brought to you by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, a full-service land and commercial brokerage with almost $4 billion in transactions since 1996.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. I am your host, Linda Schultz, and I am joined, as always, by my emotional support human, Chad Mills.
Whether I want to or not.
He has to be here. He likes it, though. And then we have our guest, our special guest, Mr. Andrew Diaz of Gaylord, Merlin, Ludovici, and Diaz.
Well done.
I tried. I always have to say it 7 times, before
Certainly.
I can at least attempt it. And you are a partner at your law firm.
Yes, I am.
And you are an eminent domain attorney.
That's all I do, yes.
I told you on the phone the other day that I went to law school. I'm also an attorney, barely.
Right.
I don't know any other eminent domain attorneys.
There are a few of us out there, but what's funny is, I think as we discussed, you can get through law school, take the bar exam, and not know really anything about eminent domain other than it's the power of government to do something. And so you are not alone when it comes to not knowing many people that are involved in eminent domain.
You could have ended this sentence with, you could go through law school and not know anything, and I could have just ended it right there for me. No, I think it's very important to our clients here at Saunders Ralston Dantzler. I haven't come across it yet. I have not had to deal with this yet. But I do know my parents live in Volusia County.
Sure.
And in the last, I want to say it was like 2 or 3 years, they live in a homeowners association. The government came in and they said there was an easement here, and they took back parts of these people's property to put in like a rails to trails. And so now these people have a split property. They have their property up here, there's the trail, and then they have their houses back here. I've never seen anything like that in my life. It was terrifying, and everybody was in a huge uproar, and there was really nothing that anybody could do about it. So I think it is a fascinating just sector of law that I think I mentioned to you on the phone. Treat me like I'm a kindergartner because I truly have no idea. But I wanted to get into your background a little bit. And did you want to become an eminent domain attorney?
Well, ever since I was a little boy that I could remember, I wanted to be an eminent domain lawyer. Absolutely not.
Your parents knew from the age of 3.
Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting the way, you kind of fall into things. And so when I graduated from Florida State University, I know there are a lot of Gators here, but I was an FSU graduate and majored in business, and I had a real estate degree. My degree was in real estate. And at that time, there was a demand for a lot of real estate appraisers. And so when I graduated, I was a real estate appraiser, and I became a state certified real estate appraiser and worked for a firm that was based in Tampa, doing appraisal work literally all over the state of Florida. And I had an assignment in Orlando where I was involved with appraising property for an eminent domain project. And when I saw that, and I started, working as an appraiser in the eminent domain area. And around that same time, I got a summons to show up for jury duty. And so at that point, I couldn't figure out how to get out of jury duty. So I served as a juror, and when I came back from that experience, I decided that I want to give law school a try. And I also learned when I was doing the appraisal work for eminent domain, I saw and got to see a few of the lawyers and what they do, and I thought, this could be a great combination, using my undergraduate degree in real estate, using my experience as a real estate appraiser and my certification, and coupling that with a legal degree. And so I was fortunate enough to get into Stetson Law School. And after my first year of law school, I wrote a few letters to different government agencies and law firms that were involved in eminent domain. And I was very fortunate that the county attorney for Pinellas County, her husband was a real estate appraiser, and they had a very ambitious road building project. It was probably the late 80s at that point, early 90s. And so she hired me. And so I worked there as a law student for 2 years, just with the eminent domain lawyers. And then the right person quit before I graduated from law school. And then I was able to go to work when I graduated from law school and passed the bar as an eminent domain lawyer for Pinellas County. So I got to learn on the government side. And on May 1st, 1995, I started working in the private practice representing property owners with my partners today. And so we've been together working, the firm that I'm with, Gaylord, Merlin, Ludovici, and Diaz. They were around a few years before I was, but my entire practice of law on the property owner side have been with that group of people, and it's been going great guns since. I love it. I love the practice area. I love the people I work with, and so it's just a nice. It's I didn't start out thinking that one day I'll be an eminent domain lawyer. It kind of the pieces came together, and I feel very blessed and thankful.
Definitely.
He says the business name way better than you. I think he's probably said it more than 7 times.
We'll have to, yeah, you have probably said it.
Ludovici's a tough one.
And so my understanding of eminent domain, first of all, my understanding of anything with the government is limited, but I do know that I think it is probably a pain. My understanding about eminent domain is that the government, whoever that may be, can come to your door and say, this is ours now.
Well, first they say, we're here from the government, here to help you.
And you immediately try to slam the door.
Right. And so, there's a procedure, but what eminent domain, its most basic level, is the power of the government. Now, we always say the government, but there are utility companies. There are a lot of projects going on in Florida right now, whether it's Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, some of the water authorities, railroad companies. They all have the power of eminent domain. The legislature has granted those quasi-private businesses with the power of eminent domain. But it is the government or delegated agencies that have the ability to exercise the power of eminent domain, which means they can take private property, but it's got to be for a public purpose. It's got to be reasonably necessary for that public purpose. And the key, what makes Florida different than probably every other state in this country, is that when they take your property, they have to pay you full compensation. Not fair market value, not just compensation. They have to pay full compensation for the property that they take. So it's in the U.S. Constitution, in the Florida Constitution, there's a provision that, just like you said, the government knocks on your door, we're going to take your property. But they can only do it for a public purpose, and in Florida, by paying full compensation.
And so, that's terrifying. And I think I don't know that people even know about this. So I would say that people are terrified of it, but I don't know that they even know to be terrified of it. So how do you navigate, people, I feel like they're just, I would be floundering if I was a property owner and this happened to them. What should people do? I mean, obviously they should pick up the phone and call you.
Well, that's the first bit of advice I would give. Call a lawyer that's an eminent domain lawyer, because you were talking about there are different areas of the law. Yeah. My partners and I, all our law firm does is represent property owners in eminent domain cases, and people all automatically think, oh, that's real estate, that's land use. I'm not the guy to call to review a contract, to deal with a mortgage, to handle a transaction. I don't do that. I don't try to do that. All we do is make sure that our clients are procedurally treated correctly, where the government goes through the proper steps to do it, that their rights are protected, and at the end of the day, that they get every single penny that they're entitled to for the taking. And under Florida law, and what's great about Florida law, what makes it different than, as I said, I believe it's every other state in the country, is under that definition of full compensation, the agency that's taking your property has to pay the attorney's fees and cost over and above what the property owner gets for their property. So the property owner has to be paid for not only the property that's taken from them, they also have to be paid for any negative impacts or loss in value to the remaining property.
Okay.
And so in a lot of our cases, it could be a very small taking.
Yeah.
But the damages or ripple effect caused by that taking, can literally wipe out the entire value of the remaining property. An example would be, let's say that you own a retail establishment, a fast food restaurant. And there's a small taking, but they take, as a result of that taking, your parking lot's impacted, your drive-through on-site flow is affected in such a way that it can no longer operate as a fast food restaurant. That's a substantial loss in value to your remaining property. So what's critical, what we do is, on every case, is we have an engineer review what's going on. What is the government, typically, the Department of Transportation or for a road project, it's critically important to have an engineer review the maps and plans, see how the property is going to drain in the after, see how the traffic's going to get in and out, how the property is going to actually operate.
You're talking about once the governing body takes the property. You're talking about their future plans?
Their future, that's
Okay.
exactly right. So what you have to do is kind of take a look at, what's going on with the property, what's its highest and best use, what's
Okay.
its greatest value.
We love that phrase around here, highest
absolutely.
and best use.
Highest and best use. And Florida law allows you to look at the property's highest and best use
Okay.
within the reasonable foreseeable future. And so, you must have, an engineer look at this to get your arms around what's really happening.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, the engineers, appraisers, and other experts that are necessary to actually value the property and help you with your claim, the state has to pay those costs. And again, that's over and above what the property owner gets for what's being taken.
So those costs do not come out of, if, let's say, I'm just going to throw a number out there, that the government is going to give you $300,000 for your property. Your fees, the engineer's fees, an architect's fees, whoever it is, that does not come out of that $300,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
If I can walk you kind of through the process, typically you get a letter, a notification, or what
Okay.
have you. The state has to make you an offer based upon an appraisal and provide the plans. And we like to get involved early. I think one of your questions, what should an owner do? I think the first thing an owner needs to do is contact an eminent domain lawyer.
I 100% agree with you.
And the reason for that is, when the government agencies come to your property, they come with all kinds of people, their appraiser, and they start asking you questions. And we have seen situations where there's a question that's answered by the property owner, whether it was a misunderstanding or just the property owner was not aware of what the law is, makes a statement that can be used against them later on.
It affects the property value.
There was a case that we had right there at I-4 and County Line Road, one of the big quadrants there. And the appraiser asked the property owner, what does he think it's worth? And he answered $1 million. Well, the appraiser for the state thought that that's what he meant the entire property was worth. The property owner was trying to communicate, no, that's what I think I should get for the taking of this small piece of my property. And so once that note is in the file, it's almost impossible to unring that bell.
Yeah.
We had another property owner one time write a very sophisticated real estate investor write a very detailed letter as to why he believed he should be paid X. Well, he only had the maps which showed where the line was going. He didn't realize that they were raising the level of the road 10 feet. So the damages to that property, but with all of that information already in the DOT file.
In writing.
In writing, signed by someone with a very high sophistication level, it made it a very difficult case for us to get him where he needed to be. And so we always advise, let your lawyers do your talking. Because again, the cop show's always said, what you say can and will be used against you. That doesn't apply to the lawyers. And so we like to get involved early to protect our property owners, our property owner clients, from making any statements that can be used against you. And then also what we do is we can kind of manage the process from the beginning. But once they make that offer, we take a look at it. We have our engineers review the maps and plans because they need to have maps and plans.
Well, they have to be able to prove that it's for public use, and here's the public use, and that it's whatever
Yeah,
you said.
typically it's a road project, and then they've got to show what they need is necessary.
Okay.
And so their maps and plans
Yeah.
are evidence of that.
Yeah.
And so, what we do is we have our engineers look at it, and, if there's no problem, there's no problem. We turn it over to our appraiser. The engineer can catalog, here are my concerns: drainage, access, change in the level of the road, and then those damages or those impacts are then quantified. And then so we then have the appraiser work with us, work with the property owner, because most property owners know more about their property than anything else, than anyone else. And so with that, we kind of put together a counteroffer. And, if we're able to negotiate an agreement, there's a very simple closing. The property owner pays no expenses. The only thing that the property owner would have to pay are the prorated real estate taxes for the days of the year that they own the property, like any transaction.
Like any closing, yes.
And so it's a simple closing. The property transfers to the government. The property owner gets a check. It's done. If we can't come to an agreement, then the state or government entity will file an eminent domain condemnation lawsuit to take the property.
Okay.
And if the state can prove public purpose and necessity, they then have to deposit their appraised value into the court registry. The minute they make that deposit, they become the owners of the land, can start going forward with their project, and the property owner maintains the right to claim all compensation. And a lot of our cases are resolved after a lawsuit's filed, not because some people think, the lawyers just want the litigation. No, that's not it. We get paid the same way. Yeah. What ends up happening, though, is sometimes there's just a process that has to play out.
Yeah.
Once it's in litigation, oftentimes the government agencies have more authority. They have people that can get things resolved at a higher level. But most of these cases do end up being settled through continued negotiations or through a formal mediation conference. But if you can't come to an agreement at all with the government after the suit's been filed, a jury of 12 people get to determine how much money you get and how much money the government has to pay you. And a little eminent domain trivia. There are only 2 times in Florida where a litigant has 12 people on a jury. You want to take a guess when they are?
I don't know.
I'll tell you. One is an eminent domain case.
Okay.
You get 12 jurors. The only other time you get 12 jurors is if you've been charged with a capital crime.
I almost said murder.
Murder, right? Any capital crime where the death penalty is at play. So Florida has 2 times where you can get 12 jurors when they take your land and try to take your life. So it's a very serious thing. But realistically, I'd say 98%, 97 to 98% of the cases are settled and resolved before a jury trial. But my partners and I, you've got to always, from day one, I mean, you're a lawyer, day one, prepare, how are we going to try this case? And the reason being that helps you understand what you can argue compensation-wise, how you can get it to a jury. And that's one of the reasons that you need to have a lawyer, because if you're talking for something or talking about trying to get paid for something that the law doesn't recognize, you're wasting your time. And it's important to have a lawyer that understands how to argue it and what to argue, because you could change the words in how you're saying something, and it makes it something that is legally compensable or not legally compensable.
Yeah. One of my questions that I wrote down for you actually was, what happens if somebody refuses to, give up their or be bought out of their land? And so have you had jury trials on this?
We have.
Really?
We have, yes.
Okay.
There aren't many. Probably the case that I was telling you at I-4 and County Line Road, that was a jury trial. And I think the biggest jury verdict in Hillsborough County was a case that my partner Carrie Gaylord and I tried. And I'm not sure if you've spent much time in downtown Tampa, but do you know where that trolley station is right across from the convention center?
I do.
Well, we represented a group of 4 owners that owned those blocks.
Okay.
And the taking authority there was an agency called Heartline, Hillsborough.
Yes.
Heartline, yeah.
Yes.
Heartline, I want to say, offered our clients about $3.5 or $4 million, and we were told that if we were going to get any more money, we had to get it from a jury. And so we took them at their word, and we got a jury verdict of about $9.5 million. So yes, and so that happens. But
I would be. I've known people who have served on a jury, and I would not want those people holding any type of fate of my future.
Well, that's always a risk.
It is.
One of the reasons that I believe that eminent domain cases are resolved through settlement or agreement is because, first, we're not arguing about liability.
Yes.
Number one, property was taken, they owe you money, and the question becomes how much. And what we find are the cases that go to trial, somebody is missing it. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it's not us, or the government's not getting it. And after these jury trials are probably about 5 days to a week and a half, the jury gets to go see the property. And
oh, really?
Yeah,
They do on site.
they do on-site visits, and we were really fortunate on that case that I told you about, that trolley station. Our jury visit was, I want to say that case was in 2001, and the jury view was on a Friday around lunchtime. At that same time at the convention center, the NFL was having their media day because that was the week of the Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. So
Kidding.
that was, at that
timing
time,
is perfect.
At that time, we had the best jury view that you could have had.
Timing is everything.
But if you've got a client with a good story to tell, and the evidence, it may be worth your while to have a jury determine the outcome. But there's always a risk.
There is.
You never know. You never, and that's for both sides.
Yeah.
But,
I always, outside of brokerage, whenever I do practice law, and somebody will say like, well, then we're just gonna go to trial, and I'm like, well, let me tell you something. You don't know if that judge had a good coffee this morning or a bad coffee. Mm-hmm. I would rather us work it out and be able to decide than put your future in someone else's hands.
Right. And you make a good point too, because if a case is going to be tried in eminent domain, as I mentioned, you're not arguing about liability.
Right.
Government's responsible.
Right.
If the case is appealed, you're looking at another year and a half or so.
It's a long process.
And you make a great point, because when you're turning it over to a jury, you're not having a say in how it's resolved.
Correct.
And a lot of times what we're able to do for our clients through mediation and negotiation, get things outside of what a jury would be able to award you. And so there's some benefit there, but there's value in certainty. Yes. And being able to move on. Yeah. And so I agree with what you said about.
It's just, the courts are already so backlogged. Yeah. So let's just.
Yeah, you're right. And getting a jury date.
Yes. Any jury trial right now, especially because of COVID, sure. It's a lot longer than what it was. I had this thought though this morning, and I really did not like any type of constitutional law, because probably I don't really understand it too well. Who gives the government the right to take someone's property, to buy someone's property from them?
Well, if we go back, as my nephew says, to olden times.
You better not be talking about the 1990s.
I'm talking about Game of Thrones or whatever. No. The whole concept of eminent domain, I think, goes back to the feudal times, kingdom. The king and queen owned all the land. And your use of it was basically subject to their saying, I want my land. And so, you go back to, documents, Magna Carta, what have you. It goes that far back. Okay. And, there is an eminent domain provision in the U.S. Constitution. Okay. There is a eminent domain provision in the Florida Constitution. Florida gives a property owner more protections than the U.S. Constitution. Okay. And the procedures in state court, I believe, are more property owner friendly than the federal
I think Florida system. In general is more property owner
Florida
friendly.
Is much more. And the big difference in federal court, it's very difficult or almost impossible to get your attorney's fees and costs
Paid by
recovered. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's where Florida is unique. And we were kind of talking about this earlier, and it's a question that, when you're talking to a potential client, the first thing they say, wait a second, how is this really not costing me any money?
Right.
And
Well, because most people, when they think of an attorney, they think of high costs.
high attorney fees.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then
A
also,
large retainer and
Yep. And also, if you're talking about a personal injury case, the attorney's recovery comes out of the
your,
award.
yes.
Eminent domain is different.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier that concept that we have a full compensation.
Yes.
The whole theory of full compensation is so the owner is put back in a place financially.
As if their land had not been taken.
Exactly.
Yes.
If their land had not been taken.
To be made whole.
To be made
As well as they
You've read
could.
the book. You've read the book. To be made whole.
Yeah.
And so there is no way that if a property owner, through no fault of their own,
Yeah.
found themselves in
The middle of an
in the
I-4
middle-
extension.
Yeah, well, not just that. Basically, the government comes in
Yeah.
and says, we need your property. We're suing you for it if you don't sell it to us. And we're coming here armed with our engineers, our experts, our appraisers, our lawyers. And if you don't like it, fight us.
Yeah, yeah.
So the whole concept of full compensation is A, to put the property owner on an equal footing with the government.
Okay.
And B, to make sure they're made whole.
Yeah.
And so the way that, getting out of the theoretical realm, it's always how does that work? So under our Florida statutes, we've got a specific statute that addresses the attorney's fees.
Okay.
And in the vast majority of cases, the way the attorney's fees are figured are whatever that first written offer that they make you. Let's say it's $100,000. Mm-hmm. That's compared to your final award. Mm-hmm. So if your final award is $200,000, mm-hmm. you as the property owner walk away with $200,000. The lawyer is paid based upon that difference, which is called a benefit. And that example of benefit was the additional $100,000.
Right.
The statute has a percentage that's it's a
Is it like a
graduated scale.
sliding
It's a
scale?
sliding
Mm-hmm.
scale.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sliding scale. And so for a benefit, an increase between 0 and 250, the attorney's fee is 33% of that
Okay.
number. And so the way it's determined, the offer was 100. You get 200.
You get the benefit of the 100.
I get 33,000
Mm-hmm.
plus the expert's costs. Those bills are also paid
Okay.
for. So at the end of the day, you walk away with what you were awarded for the land taken and damages. Mm-hmm. Plus your attorney gets paid and the experts get paid.
I feel like it can get really nuanced as far as I'm just sitting here thinking, in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
I would think that it would be harder for a property owner to then turn around and sell that property if there is a highway or road or public park or whatever, railroad, whatever. I would think it would be very, very difficult for a property owner to then be able to sell that property. And so does that play any into the compensation?
You just described what a damage is.
Yes.
Yes. And
Yes.
so if they take your property and use that part for, let's say you're on a nice, quiet, residential rural street,
Right.
and this happens all the time.
Yes.
They want to make it a 6-lane divided, heavily
This happened in
traveled,
Volusia County. This is what, yeah.
arterial.
Yeah.
So they have to pay you for, let's say the 2,000 square feet that they take, but they also have to pay you for the loss in value to your remaining property. And just what you described, that property's not as good. They have left you with an inferior property. And so our experts, our appraiser and our engineer, they assist us in coming up with basically identifying the impacts. And we had and we get compensation for that. I just was working on some cases in an area of Manatee County. It's a Moccasin Wallow Road. Beautiful 2-lane rural street. My clients had been living there forever, set back probably 150 feet from the roadway. The county widened the road to about 25 feet from their front door, and within the area taken, they've placed a median. So now when they leave their home, they've got to drive like a half a mile one way
To
go
turn
back
around.
the other. Yeah, and so, I think the offer was maybe 50 or 100,000. I ended up getting them close to $300,000 or $400,000. I can't remember because at first when the DOT came, there's no damages. I'm like, no damages? I mean, let me get this right. These people were 200 feet from the road. Now you're 20 feet from their
I hope you don't
door.
sleepwalk because those jokers can walk out and get hit in the middle of the night.
And they built that median in the partaking.
Yeah.
So the access was something that we could argue.
Yeah.
And so exactly what you said, that it's harder. Of course, it's going to be harder to sell.
Yeah.
And one or two things are going to happen. No one's going to buy it, or somebody will buy it but pay less.
Way less.
And so that drop in value, as you described it, is a great way to think of severance damages. So, yeah, we claim that.
And I just, it is very scary to think about because I've seen it happen in Deltona and Osteen, Florida.
Sure.
There was a Walmart put in.
Osteen, that's potato chip capital of the world, don't they?
Is it really?
I believe that the Osteen Spuds.
Maybe that's why I really
Elton?
like. Maybe that's really why I really like chips. I don't know. I've lived out there. My parents have raised me out there.
Is that around 206 and 207?
On
the way to St. Augustine?
Yeah, it is
Okay,
on the
yeah.
way to St. Augustine.
Yeah.
But
I've
they
handled some cases there, that's why.
well, maybe this is what there was a Walmart that was put in on a corner. And mind you, this was a 2-lane road for forever. And all of a sudden, now it's a 4-lane highway with a median down the middle. And I just remember I was little or younger, and I was thinking, that's so sad because like these people, their houses are right there. And I know I watched for years. This house had a for sale sign in front of it for years. I don't know that they ever sold it, but I just thought, well, I wouldn't, even young, I thought I would never buy that property with this road right here in your front yard. So it's a little terrifying.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is in order to be able to get compensation, there has to be a taking. So if the government already owned that area and changed the road, under the law, you can't get compensation. Florida is a taking state where there's got to be a taking in order for you to claim damages.
Okay. So when they, the client or the property owner comes to you, and then you guys get all of your people out there, and then do you, you're all over Florida, though, right? You're not just in Hillsborough or wherever.
I've got cases right now in Gadsden County, Volusia County, Indian River County.
Yeah. Okay.
Palm Beach.
Okay, so you'll go
everywhere.
Yeah.
And we've got corporate clients that have properties all over the state, and we represent mom and pops and homeowners all over the state.
Yeah.
It's all we do.
Does the law ever change? I know that the Constitution doesn't change, but I know that interpretation changes.
I would say it's gotten more defined. On certain things, and so there aren't that many eminent domain trials. And you have to have a trial pretty much to have an appeal.
Yes.
But statutorily, there was a big change in the way the attorney's fees to get that percentage that I told you. It used to be, and that was in '94.
Okay.
And prior to that, it was hourly plus, another, just a very complicated way to do it. And so that was in '94. So I would say that there aren't major changes in the laws. There have been, I'd say, just more definition and kind of nuance changes, but the fundamentals remain the same.
Yeah, it is. I'm not an appeals attorney. I've never handled an appeal in my life. But I would just think that as you go higher up, so if you have a jury award you something that you're not happy with, and then I just feel like the higher up that you keep going, the harder it is to get maybe like the outcome that you would want. And I would be nervous as a property owner to go through this situation at all, period. But especially nervous on appeal, because I just think, I know appeals attorneys, they're very specialized in what they do. They're top notch, but I feel like there's only so much that attorneys or judges or juries can do.
Well, every time you go up on appeal, it takes time. And,
Yeah.
and what's very difficult is that, most people don't have, if you're going up the chain all the way to the Florida Supreme Court, first of all, will the Florida Supreme Court take jurisdiction of it and want to hear it? It just doesn't automatically get there.
Right.
And so if they deny your even being able to get there, you're talking about a several-year process,
Yes,
a very expensive process. And most people don't have that time and aren't willing to put that time into it. But you keep using the term that if this happened to you, you'd be scared. Don't be scared. Call me. We'll take care of you. There's no reason for you to be scared.
I'll remember that.
That's what we're here for.
I'll remember that. There is, and I'm going to say that they don't listen to this podcast, the people at CSX or whatever railroad. I already have a problem with them because they shut down this town every single day at 5 p.m. They come through off of Florida Avenue,
Sure.
and it cuts through right downtown at 5 p.m. And I'm like, is this a joke? Like, I have to get home. Other people have to get home or somewhere else. That is the fact that these railroad companies are their own governing bodies and are basically, I would say, untouchable at this point. Do you deal a lot with so I understand that the government can take it and that they have given authority to these other entities. So do you deal with the utility companies or the railroad companies a lot?
On the eminent domain side.
Okay.
What you're describing, and if you really want to go deep in the weeds here, that when you're talking about the moving of train traffic, you're talking about the Interstate Commerce Clause.
Yes.
And that's
And I really don't want to go.
Transportation Act. That's not what we do.
Right.
What we do is those quasi governmental entities, there's procedures that they have to follow.
Okay.
They've got to follow Florida law. They do have the power of eminent domain. And so we deal, especially right now, like I said, FP&L, Duke Energy.
Now, I know that
those cases all over the state. And
that they have to have an easement, a utilities easement. You know what I mean? Even Spectrum has to have, my internet has to have an easement to run their lines or, whatever it is. But so you do deal with these
every day. I mean, I've got several cases right now, and I'm waiting for a judge to enter an order against what's a joint order on a case resolving one against Florida Power and Light in Gaston County. So we deal with power companies every day, and over the last several years, especially through Polk County, there have been some major utility projects. There was one, Sable Trail.
Yeah.
That was a pipeline that I think linked 3 states together. You also had another Florida Power and Light had a project that came up from Okeechobee, came through, came up north to north central Florida, and we handled a bunch of those cases. And then again, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, Clay County Electrical. A lot of your power companies are strengthening their grid, and so we deal with them literally all over the state. Just had a case earlier this year in Charlotte County against one of the power companies. So
I think I said in the beginning, I think anything to do with the government is probably a pain in the neck.
But it's just, that's our world. We deal with it.
Yes, you're used to it.
You mentioned the utility companies. I had a client who I loved her. She was a character. I went to see her, and one of the natural gas pipeline companies were putting this pipe, relatively close to her house, and some beautiful oaks were being taken out. And when I go to see her, she goes, "Andrew, you tell them over my dead body, this is not going to happen. We'll never. It's not happening. They're going to have to. No way." I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do. I hear you loud and clear. So a couple of weeks later, go by. I call her and Susie, how you doing? Fine. What's going on? Susie, they just told me their willing to pay $175,000. She goes, take it.
Yeah, don't give me death. Give me 175,000.
So what's so funny is then a couple of weeks later, get the paperwork.
Yeah.
And her, I just follow up with her, and I call her. I go, Susie, how you doing? She goes, free and clear. So she just paid off her entire mortgage with
I
that.
love that.
And so it's funny how, it's amazing how
money talks.
How money
talks.
But that was one of my favorite when you talked about the utilities and
Yeah.
being scared. I mean, she was one that, man, when you walked
She
in
had
there
her
first,
pitchfork out.
Oh, she was ready to go, and then all of a sudden the numbers like,
That's
boom.
so. I was actually
Yeah.
going to ask you because
Yeah.
one of my favorite. I was in a deposition and I had a client throw a chair.
Yeah.
And personally, I mean, as an attorney, I was like, please never do that.
Mm-hmm.
The human side of me,
Right.
I thought it was the funniest thing,
Oh, yeah.
And so, do you ever have and real estate can bring out the worst in people. Have you ever had any like crazy?
I wouldn't say crazy, but it was it was. I had to laugh. Did you ever watch The Sopranos?
Yes.
Okay. I had a client who reminded me of Big Pussy Bumpensero. Mm-hmm. Big guy. And this guy, I love the guy. He was literally born with nothing. I mean, he really came from a poor family. And, the guy, through just sheer hard work and determination, he ended up being the owner of the largest independent coffee roasting facility in the Southeast United States. And he was based in Tampa. And DOT was taking his entire facility. And, it was, they weren't treating him right. They really were paying him just for his warehouse facility.
And meanwhile, his operation has to be somewhere.
And what's funny is when you have it's basically a factory. It's a factory. And so, the raw bean goes in, the packaged coffee is shipped. And so those manufacturing lines cost a fortune to put up, to get permitted,
to maintain everything.
And it's not like you can just unplug them and take them down the road. And so a big argument in his case was
he has to pay somebody to disassemble and reassemble.
If you can.
Yeah, that's true.
If you can, because a lot of that stuff you won't know.
That's true.
And so what ends up happening is, on a valuation standpoint, we're taking the position that this isn't something that's in the market. This is something you have to create.
Right.
And you don't go to Walmart and say, buy this, and here it is. And it's not plug and play. You've got to create it. And so the reproduction cost of all of this and to value this factory is operational, fully permitting and running. And so to value his property, I found a gentleman that puts together coffee roasting lines for Starbucks in Seattle.
No kidding.
And brought him down, and he valued what it would cost to replace what this guy had. And our numbers were substantially higher than DOT because they just kind of ignored this. So, and my client was very hands-on. I mean, he literally, no formal education other than working his tail off to get to where he was. And so the DOT hires a coffee machinery expert. And so we're taking his deposition, and my client was with me the whole time. And so I asked the guy a question. I go, have you ever been inside a fully functioning coffee roasting facility? And he goes, operating? No. I go, excuse me? So let me get this right. So you've never been in a coffee roasting factory while it's working?
But you're the expert.
Yeah. And they go, was it after hours? No. Well, what was going on? They goes, oh, well, they went out of business all for salvage.
Like, thank you. This is relevant.
So your numbers are based on salvage value, not, that's salvage. And then as we were taking his deposition later on, there was a piece of equipment that he didn't give us credit for. And so the question was, well, where is this? Well, I didn't see it. And then my client looks at this, goes, "Is this guy an idiot or what? Where did they find
In the middle of
in the middle of the deposition? It's all there." And he just, but it was one of those. They just
Yeah.
And so when my client was obviously not happy, but his looking at me on the record, goes, "Where'd they find this idiot?"
And the court reporter's on. You're like, "Please don't put that in here."
Yeah, but I mean, it was just, unfortunately. That might be one of the results that I'm most proud of, because I was able to get that guy literally enough money to replace his facility, double the size of it, and now his daughter's running the business now, and they're
kidding.
doing great. And so it was just a great time. Thank you.
Applause from the crowd.
Yeah, and if you're on the crosstown coming into to Tampa, right there near IKEA.
Yeah.
The coffee roasting facility is right in that area.
No
Brisk
kidding.
Coffee. And so that was one of the results that I was most proud of.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is amazing. I do love a good on record dig at the other side.
Oh, he was. What is this guy, an idiot?
And also, who knew that there were coffee roasting machine experts?
Somebody's got to do it.
It's true. You never think about things. I never think about things like that. So that is a very interesting.
That's funny. I still remember the guy's name, Dan Beliveau.
If anybody needs an
expert from Seattle,
which is also incredible that he would. Starbucks is huge.
And we got him paid for all his time, because that was part of full compensation.
So maybe that's like a deterrence for the government to not take so many properties. Yeah. Who knows? Well, I thank you so much for coming on. I feel like I have a bit more of an understanding about all of this, and I won't be scared. I'll just call you, or I'll tell everybody to call you.
There you go.
And we just really Chad, you've been awfully quiet back there.
Listen, he said it best. Let the attorneys do the talking for you. I was hands off in this one.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I had fun. Time flies.
Time does fly. No, we super appreciate it. Thank you so much for all of your expertise and your words, and hope to see you again.
Thanks. And if anybody ever has questions, my number is 813-221-9000. Feel free to call me.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.